Hi, sixth graders. Today's lesson is all about finding the area of rectangles, other parallelograms, and triangles. We're going to do this by using formulas. So here we have three shapes that we're going to be looking at today. We have a rectangle, another parallelogram that's not a rectangle, and then we also have a triangle. These are our formulas that we're going to be using. The area of a rectangle, you might see this formula written in two different ways, so I gave them both to you. One way is area equals length times width, or you're going to see area equals base times height. I actually like area equals base times height because those are the types of variables you're going to see as you grow older as a mathematician in your math classes. So I'd recommend learning this one, area equals base times height, but either one works for you. So over here we have our rectangle, and when you were younger and someone asked you to find the area, you probably counted every single square unit and you found out that there were 12. Now, to show that this formula works, especially if we have shapes that are bigger, or shapes that don't have a grid, or shapes that have so many squares that I just don't want to count them all. So I could count them all and get 12 square units, or I could take the base or the length, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 units. So I'm going to jot a little 4 there. And then I have my height or my width, and that's 1, 2, 3. And if you notice, both formulas tell us to multiply those. So when I do 4 times 3, I get 12 units squared, or square units. And the reason that the units have to be squared is because if you notice, we are filling up the area with squares. Also, we did a unit 4 times another unit 3, and a unit times a unit is a unit squared. So next we have area of parallelograms, and what you'll notice is the formula is the same. Area equals base times height. Now before I show you that this works, I want to show you why. A lot of my students want to know why base times height also works for parallelogram, because initially these don't look like they're the same. So if you notice, my base, 1, 2, 3, 4, so my base has a distance of 4. I'm going to jot that right here. And if you notice my height, it's kind of hard. We don't want to do the slanted side. So if you think about when you go to the doctors, when they measure your height, they want you to stand up straight. So we want this perpendicular, this straight up and down. I can count the height here, I could count it here, I could count it here, but I need to make sure that it's going straight up and down. So the height of this parallelogram is 1, 2, 3. So I'm just going to jot a 3 off to the side. And 3 times 4, this is telling me that this parallelogram is also 12 units for the area. And since it's hard to see, what I've done is I wanted to show you that if I just cut off this piece of my parallelogram and slide it over, and you'll notice it's exactly the same size as our rectangle above it because it had a base of 4 and a height of 3. So parallelograms are very similar to traditional rectangles, so we can use area equals base times height, and hopefully that illustration showed you that it's going to get the same answer. So I'm just going to draw a line up here. We got 12 for the parallelogram, we got 12 for the rectangle. And the next shape that we're going to explore today is the area of a triangle. So a triangle, you might see this written two ways. I'm going to underline the way that you usually see it. Area equals 1/2 of the base times the height. First, let's measure the base and the height of this triangle. So the base of my triangle is a length of 2 units. So I'm just going to jot the 2 there. The height of my triangle is 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice I did not use the slanted side of my triangle. The base is whatever the bottom or the resting part is, and then the height is the straight up and down side, or the perpendicular side. It should make this perfect right angle over here. Now, if you notice, we're going to take 1/2 of the base times height, or we're going to take base times height and we're going to divide it by 2. I'm going to show you why. If I take the base times the height, 2 times 4, that would actually give us 8 square units. And if you notice, 2 times 4, making 8 square units, would give us a rectangle. But I don't want the rectangle. I have to take this rectangle, I have to cut it in half, and I get my triangle. So if I do 4 times 2 and then I cut it in half, it's going to give me the area of this triangle. And I hopefully just showed you with our illustration that a triangle is just a rectangle cut in half. So I'm going to use my formula 1/2 stuck to or multiplied by the base, which was 2, which is stuck to or multiplied the height, which is 4. And we know that when we're multiplying things, we can multiply in any order. So I'm first going to choose to do 2 times 4, which is 8. And then I'm going to bring down my 1/2 because I haven't used that yet. So 1/2 of 8. Another way to think of this is taking 8, and when you're cutting something in half, you're dividing it by 2. I'm going to think of this as 8 divided by 2, which is 4 square units. Okay. So if you remember, the area is covered by these squares, okay? So up here, you might see it written as units squared, or maybe if they gave you inches squared or centimeters squared, or you're going to see it this way, where we have the word or the abbreviation for square, square units, square inches, square centimeters. Now we're going to practice on a rectangle, another parallelogram, and a triangle. Before I dive into these problems, I like to always remind myself of my formulas, so I jot them down, and I'm just going to show them with pictures. So I'm going to draw a quick rectangle, a parallelogram, and I'm going to write area equals base times height. Next, I'm going to draw a triangle. Any type of triangle will do. Area equals 1/2 base times height. The biggest mistake I see is when people are doing their triangles, they just forget to cut them in half. So what they were really doing was finding base times height, which would work for a rectangle or a parallelogram. But remember, when it's triangles, we sliced those in half. So the first thing I have here is a rectangle. I am going to copy down my formula, area equals base times height. For the base, I'm going to substitute 12.2 times my height, which is 8, equals area. Since I don't know this mental math, I need to jot this off to the side. 12.2 times 8, I'm going to do 8 times 2 is 16, 8 times 2 is 16 again, plus 1 is 17, 8 times 1 is 8, plus 1 is 9. When I count up my decimal places, I get 97.6. So I'm going to write it over here. Area equals 97.6, and I just need my label. It's going to be centimeters squared, or square centimeters. There's 2 ways to say that. So there's a rectangle, plus we threw in a decimal just to make sure we remembered how to multiply when we have decimals. Next, we have a parallelogram, and if I go back to my formulas, it's area equals base times height again. Now, the only confusing thing about this parallelogram is I need to figure out which measurements I need to use. I have 3 measurements there, and I've got some deciding to do. So I'm going to start by copying my formula, area equals base times height. And then over here, I'm going to decide which one is my base. So my base is whatever would be resting on the table. So I'm just going to circle this 6 meters. That's my base. So I'm going to put a 6 over here for the base measurement. Next, I have to figure out my height. So I have 4 meters for this side, and I have 3 meters going down on this dotted line. Now, if I remember about height, I'm thinking I'm going to the doctors. And when I go to the doctors, they want me to stand nice and straight, perpendicular to the floor. So I wouldn't want to stand slanted this way. So I'm just quickly going to cross off that 4 meters. I didn't need to know that side for this problem. I want the height that is standing tall, like I would at the doctor's. So I'm going to pick 3 meters. And since these were stuck together, I multiply them, equals my area. This one is mental math. I can definitely do this in my head. Area equals 18. And then I just need my label. And these were meters. But since I did meters times meters, it's actually going to be meters squared. So there's the area of my parallelogram. And last but not least, we have a triangle. And triangles are tricky for 2 reasons. Number 1, it can sometimes be tricky to figure out which measurements you need. And the other way a triangle can be tricky is that we need to remember to use the correct formula. So we're not just doing base times height, we're going to do base times height, and we need to remember to cut it in half. So I'm going to copy my formula, area equals 1/2 base times height. So once again, I've got to figure out what my base is. So my base is resting on the table, so I'm going to need this 3 inches. And then I want to find my height. So if I go to the doctor's and I stand slanted like this is not going to be my height. This side over here is measured 4 inches. That's also slanted. I don't need that as my height. I'm going to choose the height that is standing tall, right? Straight up and down, perpendicular to the base. So that's 3 inches. So I'm going to do 3 inches times 3 inches for base times height. So let's copy this down. Area equals 1/2 times the base of 3 times the height of 3. And remember, we can multiply in any order, so I'm actually going to do 3 times 3 first, and I'm going to get 9. I haven't multiplied yet by a half, so I'm going to bring that down. Equals area. Now, some people can do this in their head. They know exactly what 1/2 of 9 is, or what 9 divided by 2 is. If you don't know it in your head, or you want to see it, you can always just set it up like your traditional division problem. I'm going to put 9 on the inside, 2 on the outside, because we're dividing by 2 or cutting it in half. Now, I know that 9 is not an even number, so there's going to be a decimal in my answer, because it's not going to be able to divide by 2 evenly. Now, 2 goes into 9 4 times. 4 times 2 is 8. I'm going to subtract and get 1. Bring down my 0 over here. 2 goes into 10 5 times. It's perfectly 10, so there's no leftovers. Now, my answer is not 45. It is 4.5. So my answer over here is going to be my area equals 4.5. I need to look back here. It's square inches. So I'll show you another way to write that. Square inches. I'm going to circle my answer. And there you have it. That's how we can find the area of rectangles, parallelograms, and triangles. We've also thrown in some decimals or numbers that aren't evenly divided by 2. So you might sometimes get a decimal in your answer as well. I recommend getting some scrap paper, setting yourself up, writing down your formulas, and if you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me, or you can join our Zoom sessions later this week.